This presentation answers the question, what is the right age to test IQ? There is no really a right age, but there are some ages where there are certain things to consider about different ages. IQ scores are calculated by comparing a student's performance to the performance of other children the same age. In other words, a 4-year-old would be compared to 4-year-olds, 10-year-old could be compared to other 10-year-olds, and so forth. So whatever age your child is, they'll be compared to other children their age. The most important consideration, in my opinion, is if the student can focus for about 40 to 70 minutes and if they can take it seriously. Try their best and understand why it's important. A little bit of a history. Until the past decade, almost no gifted services were available for young children. Many programs didn't start until 2nd or 3rd grade, and therefore we often didn't test until age 7 or 8. In the last decade or so, school has changed tremendously. The availability of preschool classes, VPK for example, and attendance in them has grown exponentially. And these programs now focus strongly on early academic skills and not just social skills or learning to follow directions. In addition, access to early educational apps and toys, computer software, tablets has become widespread. And in my opinion, this has dramatically changed the way an entire generation of children is basically learning. We now have a generation of children who is coming up with much earlier and more extensive exposure to academic skills than at any point in history, arguably. Educational apps dramatically change education. Software allows children to progress at their own pace. It exposes content very quickly, very dynamically, in a very entertaining fashion. Images are flashing across the screen. They're getting immediate feedback on whether or not they're successful or not. That's giving them a tremendous amount of educational and learning opportunities. Just in the course of an hour, they can have 20, 30 activities to do, and it makes them independent learners. They no longer need an adult to be sitting with them to teach them skills. Even if they can't read now, they can often acquire and practice new skills and knowledge without having to have an adult be present or make lessons for them at any given moment. It's tremendously changing the amount that they're learning and the amount they're exposed to at young ages. As a result, we now have a lot of kids entering kindergarten as fluent readers or with advanced math skills. The teachers, of course, still have to focus their time and energy on average learners and struggling learners, which means the advanced learners sometimes become bored or they're just not making good use of their educational time. Therefore, the need to find a way to serve these advanced learners is creating a need to have gifted services at earlier ages and grades. Cost and space issues are still preventing the development of enough classes to meet the needs, but they are becoming more common. Public school funding for special programs is always tied to having students with documented needs, proof that they need special education, and therefore the need to test children is becoming at younger and younger ages is becoming greater as well. It's very common nowadays to screen children at the end of kindergarten, and any children who get the necessary score on the screening would then be tested either that summer or during 1st grade. Some parents decide to pursue private testing even earlier in kindergarten or even in the months just prior to entering kindergarten because they can foresee that their child might get bored. There are some considerations with testing young children, though. First is whether or not the results are stable. Will they get the same IQ at age 4 if they were tested again at age 20? IQ tests can change over time because there are tremendous brain changes between early childhood and many people don't believe it becomes completely stable until adolescence or early adulthood. Most people, they don't change tremendously. If you're above average at age 4, you will almost certainly be above average at age 20 as long as you got good educational experiences in the meantime and didn't have a brain injury or anything like that. But the exact degree of how far above you are compared to your peers may change over time. And another thing is that IQ tests with very young children often emphasize memorized facts, concrete concepts like things you can touch or see, like a cat or a blanket. And IQ tests for older people tend to deal with more abstract material, logical reasoning, and so forth. And just because a child did very well on concrete concepts at age 4 doesn't mean they transition and make the grasp to abstract or logical concepts at an older age. So sometimes having even a very good memory can mean you test very well at age 4, but will not necessarily translate to a high IQ for an older child. Other thing is young children, they're just always not always very good test takers. They've never been tested before a lot of times, especially very young children. They don't understand why it's important to do their best, why they need to follow directions. They're easily influenced by what mood they're in right now. If they have a tummy ache, if they're hungry, they may pick the heart because they like the heart and not because it's the right answer. Because again, they don't understand why it matters if they're correct or not. Sometimes easily distracted, though many gifted children have much longer attention spans than their non-gifted peers. That's one of the reasons they can learn a lot of information. It's because they can in fact focus longer than some of their non-gifted peers. But because young children are not always good test takers, just because sometimes they don't understand why it's important, you always have to interpret results with caution. If you don't get the results you're expecting to get, you should certainly reassess later if they continue to show good academic skills and advanced learning ability, just because it just may not have been an accurate assessment. Older children, the most common ages to test are still between ages 6 and 9. At older ages, on some instruments, it'll be hard to qualify just because they need to answer almost all the questions correct on a section in order to get a high score on that section, like 42 out of 46. And these questions are extremely hard. And that also means they can't really make a careless error on an easier item because it becomes then very hard to meet the necessary score. Gifted programs are almost always concentrated in elementary and middle school grades. So high school honors and AP classes, usually you can go into those based on your academic performance and grades and not on IQ scores or gifted. Therefore, we rarely test older adolescents for gifted just because the need isn't there. Colleges really don't care at all. They care about performance because they know that just because you're gifted doesn't necessarily mean you got the highest grades. And finally, if you're unsure, just check with your child. If they're happy with the school with their classes they get, if they're excited about the things they're learning, there's no rush. But if they are complaining they're bored, they're starting to not want to go to school, they're getting in trouble for talking because they've already done their work in 5 minutes and they have nothing else to do. If they just seem to be stagnating academically, they're not growing, then it may be time to explore other opportunities for them. You can also check with the teacher and see how she feels, if it's the right time, if the child seems to be needing more than what the typical class is getting. If your child doesn't get the right, again, the results that you expected to get or were hoping to get, most school systems will test again in 1 to 2 years. Different schools have different policies, and private testing can also sometimes be an option. Thank you.